recommend this if you are insane and 15 years old. Would not recommend this if your prefrontal cortex is about to be fully cooked. I was about to start this video by quoting Hamilton, and I thought maybe that's not a great idea, but also I literally have the Hamilton book in the background here, so it's not as if it's a secret that I like Hamilton. Anyway, my name's Kara. If you're new here, I am very excited to tell you about some popular books that I hated. Hate is a strong word. I don't hate many books, but there are some here that I definitely am a little bit pissed at myself that I read them. I'm doing this as a companion to a video that I posted a couple of months ago, which was unpopular books that I loved. Here I'm just to badmouth some books. I don't really care that much about what other people's opinions are about books that I like, but I do want to be sensitive just towards other people's feelings. If I am talking badly about a book that you absolutely love, don't even worry about it. It's not that serious. I think it's a good thing that people don't all like the same books. I think it's a good thing that we can discuss these things. I think that it's so wonderful that there are so many millions, billions, I don't know, books in the world that so many different people can enjoy. So if you like any of these books, I'm not poo-pooing on them for your sake. It's just not my taste. If they sound good to you, pick them up. Just because I don't like a book doesn't mean that it's a bad book. So a popular book is a book that has more than 10,000 reviews on Storygraph, which is the book tracking app that I use. And for me to have hated it, I rated it less than 3 stars. I'm going to start with The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. Richard Osman is a British comedian. I liked him on Taskmaster and I like some of the shows that he hosts on British TV. So no hate towards Richard Osman, and this series is incredibly popular. They're making like a TV show with Pierce Brosnan and Helen Mirren, so like he's fine. He's doing well. This book series is doing well. It's well loved. The book is about 4 retired people who have this Thursday murder club where they basically just try and solve cold cases because they're all obsessed with like murder mysteries. And then one time at their retirement village, someone ends up dead and they think that they can solve the mystery. And then the whole book is just about them trying to solve the mystery and like getting in the way of the police, but then sometimes the police have to come to them for help. It's pretty funny. I think this is what birthed sort of the cozy murder mystery genre, or at least like gave it another boost of popularity a couple of years ago. I struggle though to imagine exactly what a murder mystery looks like. I like to watch murder mystery series on TV. This particular one I also think was maybe a little bit too long. I was pretty interested and I would have said rated it about, 4 stars halfway throughout the book. But at that point, it just really started to drag and I didn't care that much about the characters to really worry too much about where the rest of the story was going. So I think that the pacing was a little bit off for me, which I do think is an important aspect of a murder mystery book. So yeah, it just didn't sit very well for me. It's not a bad book, I just didn't enjoy it very much. The next one that we have is We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. And I kind of hope I'm not going to upset people by saying this because this book has a pretty devout following. Let's call it that. Love your enthusiasm, by the way. I too am obsessed with things to that degree. But please don't be mean to me. I just don't like this book very much. I also didn't like The Secret History a lot, if that makes it better or worse. This book is compared to The Secret History quite a lot, which is like the more popular version of this sort of dark academia story. If We Were Villains is about a group of students who go to a elite university and they all study Shakespeare. And throughout the book, they speak in this very like weird quasi-Shakespeare English, like interlaced with their modern English and with like slang from the present day. And then they bring Shakespeare's lines or made up words and stuff like that into their speech as well, which is actually kind of an interesting way at which to look at language and the way in which it can evolve in a very small group who have like a very particular thing that they have in common, especially if that thing is language. I think that's actually a very interesting part of the book, and I kind of wish that ML Real had explored that more, because that's the part that I found most interesting. The other plot point in the book is about a murder that happens, or like an alleged murder that happens, and I just didn't really care that much for it. Let's maybe park it there. But I think in general, the dark academia genres is just not something that works for me very well, because I'm not that intrigued by it. It just wasn't for me. But obviously it is for a very select group of people, and I'm sure that if you read this book and you love this book, you will find those people on the internet and they'll be very happy to have you as part of their small but mighty army. I'm kind of upset about this next book being on this list because I really love this author in general, and that author is Emily Henry. I have read 4 of her books now, and this is the only book of hers that I genuinely didn't like, and that book is Happy Place. This book is about a group of friends who all have this place that they go to, this cottage that they go to every single summer because it's their happy place, and they've been going there for like 10 years at this point, and it's sort of like they're tethered to each other as they go into their adult lives and as they make sure that they're able to spend time with one another, and they've got this like quality place where they can spend quality time together every single year. And this place is going to be sold, so they have one last summer which they can go and visit this place for a week. And the 2 main characters in this book, they are a couple, and they have recently broken up, like a month before the events of the book. And they don't want to tell their friends because they don't want to ruin this last holiday that all of them have there together, so they just pretend to still be together, and they think that their friends are none the wiser. The problem that I have with this book is that it has so many of like the romance tropes that I would like on paper. Like it's got the, oh no, we have to share bed, or oh, we're fake dating now, or you know, things like that. I love those sorts of things. I normally absolutely eat it up, but this book was so boring. I didn't like any of the characters, and I just found it dragged throughout basically the last 3/4 of the book. The first bit was interesting, and then I was like, well, now what? Now what's going to happen? The only part that I genuinely really enjoyed were the time jumps to the past story. I kind of wished that we just got the past story as a book by itself, because I found that so much more compelling than the present day story, which is really a bummer because it was like a much shorter part of the book. I think I can forgive a book for being many things, but I can't forgive a book for being boring. Maybe that's partly Emily Henry's fault because she has set a very high bar for herself to clear every time I read one of her books. Next up, we have a book called The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. This is a historical fiction book, and I used to be very obsessed with historical fiction when I was like in high school. That used to be like my favorite genre. So this book takes place in France during the Second World War, and it follows the story of 2 sisters who behave extremely differently during the occupation of Paris. And it's very fascinating just to follow their stories, but it just goes on for such a long time. I don't know why people feel the need to drag stories out. It was really a fascinating concept, but it was executed in such a melodramatic way that I just really wasn't convinced by anything that was happening about halfway through the book. So this story like really fell flat for me just because it felt like it was trying to coax emotions out of me rather than just letting things happen and then leaving me to sit with those emotions. I don't like it when authors do that. I don't like being told what I should feel, whether that's a positive or a negative emotion. I want those emotions to, come up by themselves. I don't want to be prescribed for what I should be feeling when I'm reading a book. This is another book that has an extremely devoted cult following, I'm gonna say. It's The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I read this book earlier this year, and I actually have a reading vlog about this, so if you want to know more in-depth thoughts that I had, you can go and watch that. I'll link it in the description. The Bell Jar is about a young woman who works at a magazine in New York in like the late 50s, early 60s, around that time. And when she goes back home, she experiences a mental decline and she ends up institutionalized. And we sort of follow her story in the mental institution as well as she's being treated. This is supposed to be like a semi-autobiographical book for Sylvia Plath, but I did not enjoy this book very much just because it felt extremely disjointed. The writing style is very beautiful, and I've read Sylvia Plath's poetry, and I think you can really see that this was written by a poet. It flows very nicely, and the imagery is very rich and vivid. And I mean, it has the iconic fig tree metaphor in it as well. So, like, that's like something that you can really see through the eyes of a poet. I really loved reading that one in context. It was really cool. But because the story felt so fractured, it was very difficult for me to have something to grab onto, and I didn't enjoy the process of reading it that much. Obviously, the subject matter is pretty difficult, like pretty tough to deal with as well, because it's about institutionalization and female mental illness in a time in which it was not being treated very well or at all, or very poorly. But taking even all of those things into account as for the reasons why I might, find it disturbing, it's also extremely racist and anti-Semitic, so it's kind of tough to read those parts as well. And like, it's not necessarily ever pointed out that those things are wrong. It's just sort of included in the book, like, by the by. It feels like whiplash reading this book, so I didn't enjoy it. I get why it's like a landmark novel for a lot of people and in the literary world, but I did not enjoy this one. I wouldn't say I hated it, but I really, really disliked it. This is another story that I think a lot of people might have read or at least are familiar with just because it's so entrenched in pop culture, and that is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. The fascinating thing to me about Peter Pan is that I find it a lot more compelling and a lot more rich in its pop culture sensibility. I didn't find the story that interesting, and I don't know if that's just because it's been smashed up and put back together again so many times. It's a very fascinating book to read the source material from because it feels so different and almost devoid of like the magic that I associate with the story of Peter Pan. It didn't feel like it was contributing anything to how I felt about the story. In fact, it made me like the story less. In a way, maybe that was a good thing, but because it really did go into a lot of detail about how cruel Peter Pan was to Wendy and even to Tinkerbell as well, and how horrible boys are to girls. So maybe it is actually a pretty good depiction of how people experience things, but it's just not a nice book to read. And it's definitely not a fun children's book. Like, Anne of Green Gables is a fun children's book to read if you want to just read something, a light children's classic. Peter Pan is not that for me at all. I was very surprised that it didn't deliver on any of that childhood magic that I associate with it when I was reading it. Next up, we have a book that I was absolutely obsessed with when I was in high school. And then I read it again a couple of years ago just to see if I still have the same opinion about it. And I absolutely hated it. The book is If I Stay by Gayle Forman. This is about a teenage girl whose family suddenly dies and she is in a coma. And she basically has like an out-of-body experience, and her ghost, or whatever you want to call it, is sort of watching everything happen in the hospital, how her body is trying to survive, and her grandparents coming to visit her, and her boyfriend like trying to come and see her, and her best friend and her boyfriend who don't get along, sort of getting along finally because they've sort of connected over how much they both love her. It's kind of like a very sweet story just to read when you're 15 years old. That's the kind of thing that you really get on with when you're at that point in like your mental development. Like, no hate, that's like, you should be reading those things then. That's what you should be doing. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I think it's a rite of passage. But when I reread it, I was like, it's not a very timeless story. Would recommend this if you are insane and 15 years old. Would not recommend this if your prefrontal cortex is about to be fully cooked. Next up, we have the only non-fiction book that I have on this list. The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. This is a book about neurology. Oliver Sacks is a neurologist who basically collected a bunch of different case studies from a bunch of different people over the years, and he talks about the different things that he learned about the human mind and how memory works and how socialization works through all these different people that he treated over the years. This book, though, is incredibly ableist and pro-institutionalization and racist, and it's genuinely quite hard to read. I found some of the stories interesting. I listened to this as an audiobook for my library, so no money going to Oliver Sacks for me. There were so many things that were truly fascinating, but I was very confused that it hadn't been updated to like a modern day thing, or that there wasn't even like an author's note or something about that saying that the language that's being used in this book is quite dated, and like just be aware of that. So it was a hard read for me. It's not something that I would recommend, especially if you find things like that quite triggering. The final two books that I have for this video are both romance books. Most of the time, if I don't like a romance book, I just won't rate it because I don't really want to, yuck anyone's yum. That's not my thing. But I do think that these two deserved the bad scores that I gave them on Storygraph. The first one is Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. This one I think I didn't like at all because of how much I love the love hypothesis. That is my most uncharacteristic 5-star read of all time. But then I read Love on the Brain and I was like, brought straight back down to earth. It basically follows two people who are working at NASA and who have to sort of like work together to achieve something that they want to achieve. The one redeeming factor that this book had is that the main characters were both vegan, and I'm a vegan, so I like representation in media. But besides that, I didn't like anything about them. They were boring, or they were just stupid. Like, as adults who have professional jobs as scientists at NASA should not be stupid. I just found that the story was asking me to limit my sense of reality a little bit too much, and I didn't like that. I don't mind, suspending reality for a little bit when I'm reading certain books, but this one was asking for too much from me, and I wasn't in the mood to give it. So, sorry, Ali Hazelwood. Loved Love Hypothesis. This one you could have kept in your drafts. And then the final one that I have for today is the Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. I read this one when it was extremely popular on like BookTok, just because I wanted to know why everyone said it was really bad. It's basically a fake dating romance book where the female main character has to go to a wedding in Spain, and she tells her family that she has a boyfriend, and the guy who she hates at work offers to go as her boyfriend. Again, this one just was asking me to suspend my reality a little bit too much. I like those tropes. I don't mind those tropes. In fact, in some cases, I really enjoy those tropes. But this just felt a little bit too far-fetched and too reliant on cliches. And I feel like as soon as you rely on a cliche to carry your story and not to like present a cliche and then turn it on its head, I'm not interested in that. I've read enough cliched stories that I know what the cliche is. I don't have to read more about that. Now I want to see how it's going to be subverted. That's kind of where I am at with my reading journey. But maybe if you're like just getting into reading, I guess this could be a good place to start because it's very readable. I read it in a day. Yeah, did not like that one at all. And I completely agree with the criticism that everyone gave to that book back when it first came out as well. Alright, those are all the books that I wanted to hate on today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I mean, please leave any of your unpopular book opinions in the comments. Any books that you've seen that are extremely popular that you cannot understand for the life of you why they're so popular. I would love to know. I like having discussions like these about books just because I find book popularity so fascinating. It's something that kind of feels very elusive, and I'm not always sure why certain books become popular and why other ones just don't. If I should talk to any book that you really love, ignore me. Literally, who fucking cares? It's a book and it's not that serious, and we're all just friends here having a gab. So I hope that you have a lovely day further, and I'll see you again next week with another video. Take care.